Suzi is the Executive Director of Simple Public Health and Environment Resources for Education, or SPHERE for short. Go get him.
Hi everyone. As you've heard, my name is Suzi and I'm really psyched to be here. I am doing this for my daughters and for a lot of young women, especially women in the world, so it's kind of touching to be in a boys' school. But I'm really grateful that we're being welcomed here so warmly. I'm going to take you back to a really tipping point in my life, like our magnificent previous speaker was saying. It was February 1993, and I was a high school teacher, and I was grading papers. Now, those of you who've been teachers may know that it's less than exciting work. And so I put down the papers and picked up the local newspaper. It was the Tribune de Genève, because I was living in Geneva in Switzerland. And I read an article about a country that I didn't really know where to situate on a map, and that was Uganda. And you've heard about Uganda today from Greg. And I read this article, and it said that there were 170,000 children who had lost one or both parents to AIDS. 170,000 children orphaned by AIDS. And what was striking there was that that was the population of the city I was living in. That's the whole population of Geneva, Switzerland. So I sort of said to myself, gee, I wish I could do something about that someday. And then I went back to grading my papers. And little did I know that that tiny wish I made was going to pick me up and take me places I never expected to go, all the way to here. It did take me to Uganda and to 10 other African countries: South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Rwanda, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Nigeria. I even worked in Kenya for 7 months and set up an event like this, only there were 7,000 people. I didn't have to speak, so it was a lot easier. And I have been fortunate to meet the most amazing people who are working in the world of HIV/AIDS. You've met one of them, and you're going to meet another one of them just in a little while. And I've met prostitutes who are trying to figure out how not to get AIDS. And I've met bishops who are advocating for condoms. And I've met doctors and researchers like James, who's coming, and ministers of health and community groups like the NGOs that you've heard about, and the military, the most amazing people worldwide. And I never expected to go anywhere with all that. But I did end up working on a World AIDS Conference. I worked with a foundation in Harvard, and from that point, I became somewhat of an expert in children orphaned by AIDS. What a sad thing to have to say. There were so many of them. At the time, there were 10 million. There are now over 15 million children worldwide. I worked with the Red Cross worldwide, with faith-based groups who do a great deal, some of them out of Nashville. I worked on startup foundations, nonprofits, new philanthropists, and then I got this phenomenal job running millions of dollars, programs in 16 countries to support children whose parents were sick or dying or dead of AIDS. And after 3 years there, on November 9th, 2006, I realized that all these phenomenal people I'd been working with, and all the money and all the passion and hard work, was not delivering enough benefit in the field to the people we were trying to reach, the mothers, the children, the people in the front lines. And so I quit a highly paid job. I was in Washington, D.C. I had, you would think I had everything, but I didn't have the satisfaction of knowing that I was reaching the people that we wanted to serve. So I sort of went into a retreat, and I read everything I could. I thought through all my experiences, and I realized what the missing link was. And that was that something we all take for granted, especially in a school and university environment, something we take for granted was not available to these people, and that was the ability to read and receive the messages we were carefully preparing for them. So I realized this link between low literacy, which is almost the starting point, or illiteracy, which leads people into poor health because they just don't know the basics that many of us pick up from books and brochures and newspapers. And as we've heard from some of our magnificent speakers today, getting sick costs an awful lot of money. And when you're already quite poor, we talk about the bottom billion sometimes, that if you're a little bit poor and you get sick, you end up destitute. And so this link into complete poverty is this terrible, vicious circle. And I realized I really had to get to work on this low literacy to go that last mile. So I was fortunate to get to meet some very cool people who were working in South Africa on some tools to reach people in their country who had not learned to read and write because of apartheid. The Black Africans didn't want to go to school under apartheid because they didn't want to learn Afrikaans, and they would have been forced to learn it. There were 9 African nations. So I got involved with this team, Books, am I doing that? Books of Hope, who were very good at turning really complex ideas into really simple tools, and this is one of the ones I worked on. Now, those of you in the medical world know what clinical trials are. It's a really complex notion to explain if you don't have access to high vocabulary. This is an example of how it's done with artwork and sound. So, let's see.
It's the study doctor's responsibility to make sure your life, health, privacy, and dignity are protected. You have to be completely honest with your study doctor, or your health could be at risk, and you may get hurt. When the trial ends, you'll be told of how to take care of your illness. You may be able to stay on the new medication which you received during the trial. If not, you'll be able to get other care or treatment.
No fancy words explaining what kind of things to expect in a clinical trial. Now, there were books done on this. This kind of tool has been made for tuberculosis, for AIDS, for smoking cessation, for malaria, for all sorts of really big killers. It can be made in any language and on just about any topic. Okay, after that, I got involved with another group who were working purely on pictorial tools, and interestingly enough, primarily for the military. Yeah, so I helped them come into their own and learn about what global public health required as visual tools. Now, there are millions and millions of people with tuberculosis, and one of the figures just came out there, 500,000 with multi-drug resistant tuberculosis right now. So I hope you can see these pictures. You shouldn't have to read the text because it shows you how to, that was me, how to inhale deeply 3 times and exhale so that when you cough, you give really deep phlegm sample, which is how one diagnoses whether someone has TB or not. So this has been picked up by people using your taxes, USAID, to go to South Africa and help people give sputum samples and get treatment much more quickly. Now, I was a little bit involved in that one. I was much more involved in the following one. Now, many of you are aware of condoms, and they are the best barrier method we have to avoid unwanted pregnancies that lead to huge complications. notably in the USA, not just worldwide, and avoid sexually transmitted infections, including AIDS, which is still not curable, as you know, and there are millions of people who have it. So I got very involved in this, and anyone who wants to hide their eyes, this is the moment, because here's the slide. So this actually demonstrates how you would use a female condom, and I did say I was very focused on women, because women are always less literate than men in any country, anywhere. If you have a country where the average literacy rate is 60%, the men are literate at 70% and the women at 50%, invariably around the world. And so this shows how to insert and remove a female condom safely. And this was distributed to tens of thousands of people worldwide and is picked up by the United Nations to help women control their prevention. The next market for this is going to be Washington, D.C., where 500,000 female condoms are going to go out. And do you know what the illiteracy rate is in Washington, D.C.? I've been talking a lot about Africa. In Washington, D.C., in the adult population above age 19, it is 36%. 1 in 3 adults in Washington, D.C. is not functionally literate. They may, they can count, they can manage, but they can't read a document that we would give them. It's also a problem in Tennessee. Don't go thinking it's worse in DC. Okay, so the purpose of these materials is to improve lives. Really, before people get sick, how do you prevent the big killers? How do we avoid, all of us in this room and this bottom billion, how do we keep them from getting TB, HIV, malaria? What are the problems with impure water? Why is it that 4.3 million babies die every year in the first days of life? Completely avoidable. Our friend Scott in the military explained that they warmed the baby up, that baby that they rescued. Just simple things like that. These are all things that we could communicate to people who really want to take care of their families and one another. So I decided that I'd try to find something that I didn't have to market to people, to sell to people, like the speaking books or these little quick point guides. And I realized that there was a tool that was probably in everyone's hands. Can everyone who has one of these take it out or at least raise their hands? Okay. Yep. Do I see anyone not raising a hand? It's like just about everybody, right? Anybody know how many of these there are in the world right now? Any numbers? Excellent, yes, 4.3 billion. Actually, it's been superseded. It's estimated at 4.6 billion right now. So a lot of people have these. They don't require landlines. They don't require literacy. There are a whole lot of things that these cell phones don't require. And I was brainstorming with some friends, how can we use these that are already in the hands, notably of these poor people, mostly men. Women are less likely to have a cell phone in the developing world or poor areas. How could we use these to ensure that health messages get out there? So I've been working with some people doing this, hosting meetings where we bring together both the techies, the people who work on creating apps for cell phones and all sorts of really amazing stuff, and the health people, the community health workers, the maternal newborn child care workers, the people who are aware of how you work in the field with the poorest of the poor. In Rwanda, in Uganda, those women who were on Greg's slides, and how messages on these could meet the care that we need to be providing or the prevention messages that we need to be putting out there. So what I'm working on now is trying to, and this is the sort of big idea business, if we could switch, is to try to get this done. We know it's doable. I haven't used a single word that was difficult today. It's all very simple stuff. That's why I talk about simple public health. So to improve the lives of people in the world, anywhere, but especially these least literate, we have to know that the printed word is not going to reach them. And we have got to provide visuals for key messages. Hence the work on all this low literacy material. And there are many women out there, there are many children, but many men as well, who are counting on us to get help to them, to get care to them. But they would love for us to also get the messages, the education, the teaching to them that would mean that they could stay out of the cycle of illness and poverty. So hope you can incorporate that in your lives some way. Hope this is a way we can work in the future. Thank you. Could you switch to the next one? Thank you. Oh, thank you.